from coming in. We can do that. We have the technology to do it. We have the know-how to do it. We just need the political will to do it. And I've accomplished things like that before. There's nobody else running for president that has accomplished things like that before. I accomplished that by reducing crime in New York City. I accomplished that by reducing welfare in New York City when nobody, absolutely nobody, thought it could be done. Well, I can end illegal immigration. And when I do, we'll be able to expand legal immigration. We want people to come here. We want good people to come here. We want hardworking people to come here. We want people to come here who want to become Americans. We want people to come here who want to learn to read and write and speak English. And we want to encourage people to come here to do that. But we don't want people to come here illegally. We should end illegal immigration, and we should expand decent, lawful, legal immigration.
What do you plan to do about our dependence on foreign welfare?
What are we going to do about welfare, and what are we going to do about the dependence on foreign oil? Well, first, the dependence on foreign oil. We have to become energy independent. And you happen to be in a great place for energy independence. Thank you, Iowa. Thank you. You're from Louisiana? Well, you contribute a lot of energy too. You got a lot of the refineries. You got a lot of the natural gas. You are like a lifeblood for American energy and American energy independence. But Iowa is on the cutting edge of great technologies. Everybody knows about ethanol. I called my wife this morning and I said, I have never seen more corn in all of my life. Now you are growing corn in the middle of the cities in Iowa. You're growing corn right up to the highway. I was driving along last week and I had this little, I kind of fell asleep for a minute. I was having this little dream. I was dreaming that you were growing corn in the median, you know, in between the highway. There'd be corn even there. But isn't that great? You are helping to solve a national security problem for your country, making us energy independent. Ethanol can help. Biofuels can help. We can look at other sources for ethanol, the way Brazil has with sugar. And you also are pretty active, in fact, one of the most active in the wind turbine business.
Yes.
I was at this wind turbine plant a couple of weeks ago in Iowa. You're building wind turbines for the whole country. Well, that's a great thing to do. And then we also have to expand nuclear. We have to expand clean coal. We have to expand wind, solar, and hydropower. We have to have hybrid vehicles. We have to do more conservation. We've got to have more refineries, because right now, even if we found more oil, we don't know what to do with it. We're not able to process it. We got to expand some of our drilling. Each one of these things makes a contribution of 5 or 10 or 15%. And then when you add it all up, America is energy independent. It's necessary for our national security. You want to know about welfare? You put people to work. That's how you end welfare. And nobody has done more in this country to end welfare than I have. I had to administer the biggest welfare program in the country, and I reduced it by 640,000 people, and I reduced it in a positive way. When I started reducing welfare, and I started doing finger imaging, just like I'm talking about the tamper-proof ID card. The reason I can talk to you about these things is I've done these things. I've accomplished things that people thought were impossible. They thought it was impossible to reduce welfare in New York. 1.1 million people on welfare. Predictions were it was going to go up to 1.5 million. Everybody promised to reduce it. Everybody failed. Well, I started to reduce it. And what I did was I did finger imaging. I did finger imaging for people so we could find out who they really were. We put people to work in exchange for their welfare check, a workfare program. We started a JobStat program, and we rewarded the welfare workers, not for putting people on welfare, but for finding jobs for people. And we changed welfare completely. And all the predictions by all of the liberals that it was going to make New York City more crime-ridden, that New York City's unemployment was going to go up, that New York City's infrastructure was going to crumble. You know what happened? New York City got so much better that unemployment was cut in half, jobs were increased by 400,000, there were 640,000 fewer people on welfare, and we went from being the crime capital of America to being, according to Time magazine, the best example of urban renaissance in the country. So every one of the dire predictions turned out to be just the opposite. and we cut the welfare rolls by more than half. So the way you change welfare, real simple, work. The way you get people out of poverty is not a government-dependent program, it's work. The way you help people with health care is not to make them dependent on government, but allow them to be more dependent on themselves. We don't want to become, despite what Michael Moore says, like Cuba. Would you go to Cuba for your health care? No. Well, Michael Moore thinks you should go to Cuba for your health care. Yes. What would you do with the illegal immigrants that are already here in the United States? First thing you would do is make sure we secure the border so we don't get any more. And that's the most important thing. First things first. And I think the American people have spoke very loud and clear on that. We have to close the borders to illegal immigrants. Then, since there are so many, we have to set priorities. We should throw out any illegal immigrant who commits a crime. They should be thrown out immediately. They're not right now. When I was mayor of New York, I would try to get the Immigration Service to do that. I would give them lists of criminals, lists of drug dealers, and I would say, put them first and throw them out. And they would say, well, we can't quite do that. We have other people in front of them. And I say, well, who do you have in front of them? Well, my police would say that. And they would say, well, we have some professor who overstayed his visa. Or we have somebody who worked in a restaurant. Or we have somebody who's a gardener. And I'd say, okay, they're dangerous, I guess. But I have a drug dealer who might kill people. And they couldn't set priorities. So we have to set priorities. We should throw out anyone who's in this country as an illegal immigrant. In fact, anyone who's in this country from a foreign country who commits a crime should be thrown out of the country. And then, when we get control of our immigration system, we can figure out what to do with the remaining people. And we'll do something sensible with them, something that makes sense. But this is not the time to face that when we're looking at illegal immigration being out of control, because what happens is, because the immigration people can't control illegal immigration, they try to over-control legal immigration. We're letting the wrong people come in illegally, and we're not letting the right people come in legally. And the only way you're going to straighten that out is to get control of illegal immigration. Closing remarks. One more question and then I'll do closing remarks. How's that?
Can you talk about the Iranian influence in Iraq?
The Iranian influence in Iraq. Okay? The Iranian influence in Iraq is very, very dangerous. And one of the real things we have to consider is any exit from Iraq, which the Democrats are trying to do immediately, could result in Iran becoming much more powerful. And we don't want that. And we have to be very clear on American policy with regard to Iran. American policy with regard to Iran should be crystal clear, and it would be if I was the president. And you should ask every presidential candidate this, because this is very important for your future. My position is that Iran should not become a nuclear power. That should be against the interests of the United States. And America should let Iran know that that is not going to be tolerated, not going to be allowed. And then we should let our allies and our friends know that, and other people know that, and ask them to help us with exerting sanctions on Iran that will convince them not to take us to that step. But you need that as a committed position. Otherwise, you're not going to move Iran. I'll leave you as my closing thought with the following sort of analogy or story, or kind of gives you guidance on how I think you have to deal with Islamic terrorism. Whether it's Iran, who is the biggest state sponsor of Islamic terrorism, or any other Islamic terrorism. Remember when they had hostages in Iran? Remember that, 1970s? Some of you were too young. Most of you, I think, remember that, right? Well, those hostages were held by the Iranian government for 444 days. The hostages were tortured, the hostages were humiliated, and the United States was humiliated. And those hostages were released by Iran when something happened. And they released them in 1 hour. And the 1 hour in which they released them was the 1 hour that Ronald Reagan was sworn in as the President of the United States. That teaches me a very, very important lesson. You have to deal with Islamic terrorism from strength, not from retreat, not from announcements like America has lost, like the majority leader of the Senate said 2 months ago. Did you ever think you would hear that from a majority leader of the Senate, Democrat or Republican?